those who are new, this is a Resolume Classroom stream. That means we take a subject, in this case the blend modes, and we dive into it. It's going to be quite a technical little talk today, but I hope you enjoy it. My colleague Zoltan will be in the comments. You might know Zoltan from the Resolume forums as well. He'll answer all your really difficult questions while I'll keep the stream going. So blend modes, for those who don't know where to find them, they're over here. We have a huge list of them. What we're gonna do, I will run through almost all the blend modes, like 99% of the blend modes I will touch on. I'll start, I divided the stream into serious stuff, so that's the blend modes that require a little bit more explanation. These are also the blend modes you'll probably find in graphical software like Photoshop, Illustrator, Krita, that kind of software. Then we'll move on to the fun stuff, which are the, well, I would call it crazy Resolume blend modes, where you can use for all kinds of fun stuff. Then effects, because we're not only using blend modes to blend two clips together, but you can also use blend modes to blend in effects, so not having the effect at 100%, but at a 50 or anything other than 100% opacity, and then using blend modes to get basically out of a basic effect a whole new effect. Then we'll have a short look at transitions, because they also use the blend modes. And then lastly, we will touch upon transition phases very shortly. I did quite a big tutorial on it a while ago, but I'll explain it again at the end and show how you can create basically your own blend modes, which is really cool. And that's actually a 7.1 feature. So if you're behind, if you're running Resolume 7, this last part of the stream will not be relevant to you. So let's get started. Basically, what is a blend mode? Let's start with that. Blend modes we use to blend between two clips. By default, it's set on alpha. So I have clip 1 here, clip 2 here. If you press the title, actually it will pop up in your preview screen. Right now, this is set to add. Add is the default blend mode in Resolume. And by lowering the video opacity, I will blend between the top layer, which I call the blend layer, and the base layer. So we have one layer on top, one layer on the bottom, and the blend mode is how do we go from one clip to the other, how do we blend them together. Like I said, you can also blend in effects, blend transitions, and blend transition phases. We'll look into that later. So let's go first to the most easiest of all the blend modes, which is alpha. It's not only the easiest blend mode to use, it's also, if you ever want to composite a composition out of multiple parts, if you can do alpha, because it's the cleanest way to blend two clips in Resolume. The only requirement is that it has an alpha channel. So in this case, I have this Fire Devil image and the smoker guy, and they both have alpha channels. So I'll change this anchor of this smoker a little bit, and you can see the clips lay on top of each other perfectly. So maybe he can light the cigarette of the smoker guy. If I turn the alpha channel off, you also notice it loses its transparency. You can see it very well in the preview screen. If I reset it, turn the alpha value back on, and you can see it's transparent. So this is, when I VJ, this is mostly the way to go to make a composition. If you have clips like the clips over here, they don't have an alpha channel. A little trick you can use is the auto mask effect. It's an effect. I will drag it onto the obsidian and adjust the contrast a little bit, and now I have sort of the same result. Yes, so that's often the way to go. And I think most people already know how this alpha blending works. So let's move on to the more complex stuff, and we'll move into add first. So when we have add on, right now it's at 100%. So if your blend mode is set at 100%, you'll basically only see, basically it's not blending if you're at 100%. So what we'll do for the duration of this video is under our layer, video, set the opacity to 50. Well, it's already quite clear what the add layer does in this case. You have your RGB values. We'll take a look. Often we'll take a look to the RGB values to explain things. I might say make some mistakes because this can be quite complex theory stuff. But feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm saying something wrong. So add, it's basically a very simple sum. We have the red shape here, the blue shape below. The red shape has an red value of 255. That's the maximum value a color can have. A green of 0, a blue of 0. The blue color has a blue of 225 and a red and a green of 0. Now I'll quickly make, I have this reference color over here, and I'll open it over here. So if I take a picker now and I pick this color, you can see it's rounded down, but it's a 245. It should be 255, but it's a rounded down number. So the center of where the two shapes, the two colors mix, is they add up, leading to this color, right? Does it make sense? Adding two things. Another example I have over here. All the colors, both the shapes are set to 127, and you can see where they overlap. It turns white because basically it doubles, right? So 127 plus 127 is all the colors, all the red, green, and blue colors are at 255, giving a white shape in the center. Okay, nice talk, Mark, but how are we going to use this practically for our shows? Well, add is really one thing you should note with add is a black, the color black, has a value of 0, right? So if you add 0 to 0, you still get 0. So by saying this, I'm saying this because that means black is something that is a really easy color to mix with the add. Here I have two clips. This is the clip I want to blend in to the clip below, right? The nice thing is that the top clip, even though it has no alpha, it contains a lot of black, which won't be added to well, technically it is added to the clip below, but there is nothing to add. It's 0, right? So now if I turn this to 50, and you can see it fits in quite nicely. Now this is the point where you want to start playing. So I might want to have a little bit more opacity, a little bit less, but this is one way you can use the add blend mode. Now what I said is the advantage is it's very easy to mix black, but the disadvantage is whites don't mix very well. In this next clip, I have this color on top, this clip on top, and this clip on the bottom. Now, if I start mixing this together, you can see there is a lot of white happening, and I always call this the white soup. This is not. I think this is not a very pleasing result. It's because the colors are adding up to each other and reaching the point where all the colors are 255, or just let's say white. And And that ain't a pretty sight, I'd say. I see Zoltan is also giving some explanation in the comments to empower my my explanations. So I think that's about it for the add blend mode. I'd like to take a look at the darken blend mode. What the darken blend mode does, let's first see I have a grayscale gradient here and just a gray over here. So the grayscale will run from RGB 000 to RGB 255, 255, 255, and this this one is an exact exactly in the center at 127.5. Then the darken blend mode, let's first turn it down. Right now we're at the add mode. It's adding on to each other. Again, the gray is getting multiplied here. The black is turning to gray. Now I will switch to darken. Oh, that's the difference. Darken. And you can see the white colors, the light colors are disappearing. So what the darken does, it will look at the RGB values of both clips and it will keep the darkest colors. Any areas that are darker than the base color will be replaced by the lighter colors on the blend layer. And the result is eventually a darker layer. We can see that in the next example. I have a circle with a red line around it. Again, my bottom layer as well. Select them both. The lighter colors are disappearing. In this case, the white is gone. So that's darken. And this another example. This is of course the shapes I'm using is very theoretical example. Here I have a little bit quite a strobe-like clip. I have this one at the bottom. This one is on top, and this one is on the bottom. Now, if I add, as you can see in the bottom clip, the top part is very white and the bottom part is very dark. So, if my theory is correct, the white part should disappear when blending. Now I will start them together, and as you can see, the dark part is blended into the image, but the light part is removed, and that's because we're using the darken blend mode. So next up, multiply. Multiply is also something that darkens. It's sort of a set. You have darken, multiply, and burn. They will darken your image, and lighten, screen, and dodge will lighten it. I said it the wrong way around. Darken, multiply, and burn will darken your image. Lighten, screen, and dodge will lighten your screen. Damn. First off, multiply. What does it do? Values are multiplied. The RGB values are multiplied. So what happens in this case? We have a big black hole in our two shapes. We have the red shape and the blue shape. Why is that? If we look at the RGB values, we have a 225 red, right? Which get multiplied by the red value of the blue circle, but it's 0. So 0 times 225 is still 0. The same happens at the blue channel. It has 225 value. It gets multiplied by the other channel, which in this case is a red, which has a blue value of 0. So we get a big black hole in our composition. Even though it's a bit confusing, I think, because in by multiplication I always think, okay, I should get more out of it, but in this case you're getting less because you're multiplying by 0. Black and whites, if there's black and white in the clip, it will remain. And I think this is a really cool mode. Oh, I didn't even I still have to put it to multiply. So it also works with darken, multiply. Where are you? multiply. So, but in the darken it's the same effect because they're the sum of the both is the lightest color. So we move to multiply. Here I have a clip of the time capsule cool pack we have, which very vintage video stuff. And then we have below, this is a very old clip from the Maze Runner pack, I believe, yeah. And by using the multiply, I can blend them into each other because the multiply will respect black. Black stays black in the clip, even though this one, the top clip, doesn't have an alpha value, right? It's not like I cut it out or something. This is just square, and this also doesn't have an alpha value. So it multiplies the clips. Multiplies the clips, multiplies the pixels, the colors, but it respects black. That's really nice. Another example of this is here I got a gradient, which I added a little bit of a wave warp effect to, and I have a clip of my pink flamingos, some pink flamingos, adding them together with multiply, and I have this wavy effect running through it. So looking at it from a VJ perspective, you could say this is a way of using masks without using masks, I guess. This is a way you could interpret it. So yeah, I think this is a very useful blend mode that you might not have used yet, maybe. Then we move up one step in the darken saga, so to speak, and we come to the burn, and I've just copied the clip exactly the way the multiply was. I have to turn the burn on, and you can see it's the same effect, but it's way more intense. So this one really, I think it takes the midtones, and they are less affected. So the whites, the dark colors, and the very light colors are affected more than the midtones, which also explains why the red dress has parts that are not mixed. So yeah, that's burn. Then we go to the opposite spectrum, which is the lighten, and then next up screen and dodge. Here I have again my gradient and just a gray screen, and I will turn it to lighten. As you can see, the light colors remain and the dark colors are excluded. It's exactly at the middle of my gradient. I hope this gradient is a little bit a good way to explain how this stuff is working. I think it's a very nice visual representation of how this works. Here we keep the light colors and we ditch the dark colors. Exactly the same example with the end I showed you. We have this end and we have this clip. So if my theory is correct, right, now the bottom half of this clip should be cut out and the white should remain. So let's see if that works. And as you can see, both clips are mixed together. It's not a very pretty sight, but the dark part is not mixed, the light part is mixed. So that's lighten for you. Then we move over to screen. What this does, it's a lighten effect, and it's the base gets more brighter based on the blend layer. So here I made a gradient, and let's play. Oh, I first have to, of course, turn it on. I keep forgetting that. By the way, if you want it, you always can set the blend mode here to override the blend mode that is determined by the layer. So it's also always possible to override the blend mode set in the layer. I didn't do that in this case because, as you can see, I have a whole lot of clips and I didn't have time to switch all the layers over. So we are at screen right now. So let's have a look at screen. Screen, where are you? Yes. So and here you can really see the effect nicely. The ring is remaining and it's slowly fading. And there's again, check out the bottom example, the gradient. You can see the center part is getting lightened the most. If now let's remove this, for example, and now we really have this halo shaped part in the center. Could add, for example, a black color in the center. Oh. I'm using a palette here, and now we're getting this really weird shape mixing in using the screen blend mode. You can see the screen the screen blend mode is sort of a opposite of the multiply, sort of. But I find for VJing the multiply more useful, but basically because I like the picture-in-picture stuff a lot. And then we move on to dodge, which is again a harsher version of the previous effects. It's the reverse of the burn. Yeah, both effects are really harsh. You can see the effect. I have a gradient, and even though the gradient, the bottom is black of my gradient, they're barely used because it's dodge is a lightening effect. I didn't find really a use case for this, to be honest. It was hard to find a use case for this, but I still wanted to show you. I want to move on to a very interesting one, which is overlay. And the overlay effect, oh, I didn't even turn it again, shit. Dodge, show you it, yeah. So this is how dodge looks. It's very extreme, extreme effect. Again, the bottom is barely colored, even though we have black at the bottom, and the top one is really overexposed. Yeah, you can use this maybe for some very harsh coloring effects, but I think if I want this level of harshness, I would move to probably a posterize effect instead, I think, or just achieve the same effect with a brightness contrast effect instead of changing a blend mode to it. Yeah, I know, Steve. I'm constantly forgetting that I have the that I have to switch. So we move over to the overlay. The overlay is a combination of 50% multiply and 50% screen. So I'm switching, and now I'm switching the blend mode overlay, and I use this gradient, angular gradient, to just demonstrate it, because you can really see the two extremes on both sides. If I move it around, see the part that gets darkened and lightened. I like this effect because it's a very it's a lot more subtle than the darken, the dodge and the burn. It's a nice in between effect. So what happens here is that the dark bits gets more dark and the light bits get more light. Oh, this in between one is nice. So it's a strong contrasting blend mode. I used it here for in this example. We have this clip, very fast and colorful, and then we have the second clip, also fast, colorful, but not. We are missing the white lines, and combining them. Now I did set the blend mode to overlay because I want to switch between soft light, hard light, and overlay to show you the effects. So in this case, soft light could be seen as a lighter version of the overlay, and the hard light as a more extreme. Like I said, the overlay darkens the dark bits and lightens the light bits, and the soft and hard light, they shift this 50-50 balance into either hard or a dark or light. So when I move to the soft light, yeah, now the light is changing. You get a very soft blend between the effects. It's quite similar, I think, to the add blend mode. I'm not a big fan of this one. Good question by Mr. Holmes. When I'm playing live, should I change my layer blend mode on the go, or should layers and clips be preset to the desired blend modes. I personally, you can do whatever you want, of course. I would not shift my blend modes mid-set, especially not to, because there's a lot of the stuff in here that's very experimental and very hard to predict what's going to happen. And also stuff that in a bit will move to a difference and subtraction. Yeah, that's all. It's quite possible that all of a sudden your output is gone black because you are subtracting things or multiplying things that add up to 0 or add up to white. So no, I would not advise changing blend modes mid-set. I would say stay home and experiment and then find combinations that you like and then move on from there and add them to your set. Yeah, so we have the overlay effect. Just to compare it, the dark bits get darker, the light bits get lighter. Soft light does the same, but well, softer, and hard light pushes it more to the extreme, which I think with this clip works best. But that's this clip specifically. So yeah, it's always with VJing and Resolume, and I think all visual arts. It's very nice now to have an hour to talk about the theory behind this stuff, but in the end, you have to experiment and play around with it. But I think a video like this can hopefully help you to think before you experiment, and pushes you into a direction. We move on to the next clip, which is difference. Turn it on first. Difference. We have two difference modes. I'll touch upon both of them. Again, we see a black hole happening. The difference, it takes the difference between the two RGB values and it gives it back to you. So why is this black then? Well, the RGB value is, again, well, we know that the other two are 0, 0, so it's 225, and the other one is 225 as well. So what is the difference? 0, so it's black, right? Makes sense. If I move this up, now we can see there is something new happening. We have a yellowish color on this side, and then it says what is the difference between these two values, and then you get the green. What does difference 1 do? It's the inversion of it. So it takes the color, it's a difference, and I think it's inverted. That's the only thing I could make of it. So yeah, I think it's an inversion of it. I like the difference a lot because it opens up for experimentation. Let's stick with difference 1. And here I have this clip from Fog and Dust, and if I look at the other clip, it's exactly the same. So I basically copied the clip twice. So if I select them both, what is my output? Black, because the exact pixels are at exactly the same time. But if I now take take my blend layer, my top layer, and I'm gonna scale it up a little bit, and now really quickly funky stuff is starting happening. Look at this. I think it's pretty red. So it's almost like the center clip has some sort of aura coming on. Quickly, some comments. So it works really pretty well with scale, I think. It's like the monster. I think this is a monster. There's a monster in the monster, and the same is true. Same different effect with the difference as well. I took a gradient. Let's see what happens if we combine it. It gets a very, very happy monster now. Very happy colors. I took this clip and I took another clip from the time capsule and used the difference for this colorizing, colorizing effect. The scaling is red. Yeah, the scaling is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool effect. In this case, you you're calculating the difference between the colors of the color below and the color above. It's all very complex stuff, but what we want to know is, does it look cool? And I think it looks pretty cool. And this is also a nice point to take a look at difference 1. Difference 1, yes. Oh, this one is layer determined. This one is, yeah. This is why I don't. So yeah, difference 1. Now it's set to difference 1. This is why I keep them at layer determined, because I want to experiment and not go through like, why is this not working? Difference 1, difference. Let's try that with this one as well, see what happens. It gets, the differences are too big because it's a very, it makes sense because it's a very dark clip, so then it becomes very whitish. That I would say that that amount of white is not usable for VJing. Yeah, I generally think with VJing you should always really take into account the brightness of your output, because some of these projectors or LED screens can be very bright and they can totally blow out. So yeah, difference. Let's move on to the awesome technique. Thank you. I figured that out today. Let's move on to the next effect, which is exclusion. Same deal, gradient and the time capsule. Let's move on to exclusion. So what the exclusion does, I have to look on my cheat sheet here. It's the same as difference. The midtones are not used and black disappears. So that's I think the most important part about it is that black colors disappear when you use the exclusion. Let's see if we move to this one. Yeah, it's not getting any better. But it is, I think it is a very useful effect, useful blend mode when you are using a gradient. That's what I found the most use for it. Yes, let's just move on. Subtract. Again, turn it on. Well, you might be able to guess what this will do. It subtracts. So it subtracts the RGB values from one another. In this case, the two circles overlap. They both have a value of 127 everywhere, and they subtract this value. If I move this up, you can see there's a little bit more subtraction going on. Interesting, if I turn this on, nothing happens. Does it? Yes, there is something happening. The blue is getting subtracted from the red. Nice thing to do with the subtraction is use it as sort of a map, masks. Here I have this clip. It contains a lot of white, and it moves over the clip below, which is this, and the white parts, am I saying this correctly? Yes, the white parts get subtracted and turn black. But for this kind of effects, I would probably much rather use a mask because it's more flexible. But yeah, it's there. You can have it. Publish the cheat sheet. Well, it's a bunch of mumbo jumbo I wrote down, so it's not that. I think this video is going to be more useful than my cheat sheet, which is also in Dutch. So yeah, let's move on to, well, I talked about masks. The subtract can be used as sort of a quick way to mask something out. But for masking, we also have, of course, the 50 mask. I think I have this one set already. Oh, this is a happy accident, I guess, because this one is not set to mask. No. So in this case, the white of our meta balls is getting subtracted, and because white is contains all the colors, it basically punches holes into the gradient below. Now, what I wanted to show you is the 50 mask. I'm actually, I think Zoltan in the comments already explained how the 50s work. It's basically the same effect as I explained before, but you cannot go above 50%. So 100% is 50%. If I turn on 50 mask, and that basically turns this turns the layer you're using into a mask. So I'll turn this 100% up, and now this clip functions as a mask. Of course, in Resolume nowadays we have you can set your layer to masked mode. Back in the day we didn't have that, so then you would use the 50 mask effect. If you're making a masking layer, I would go for if you're making in your set making a dedicated masking layer, I would just make a masking layer. But you might have use for this effect, probably not as a layer effect, but as effect on the like lock it to a certain certain clip, so you know this clip and this clip only is a mask. Or if you use very little masks, maybe use 1 or 2 masks, you could say, okay, I'll use this instead of a mask layer to clean up my composition a little bit. There's another Steve call, and it's a cat. Wow. Anyway, yeah, so you can use the 50 mask as a quick option for masking if you need that. Then we move on to the last of the what I call the serious effects, which is the Luma key, which is very specific for video, and it also is very specific for what I would call old school VJing, because I think this was, I'm not that old, but I think this was like how the OG VJs did keying, chroma keying and stuff like that on the old Roland mixers. I think this is I think this is the OG mixing way. What it does, a Luma key, well, it sort of makes sense. It takes a luminescence and it uses it as a key. So if I set this to 50, it in this case takes the dark colors. Luma key, we have also Luma key 1 and Luma key 2. Luma key 1 takes the darkest part of your content, and you can shift that around with the opacity slider. In this case, of course, the faces are a darker color, or have not darker color, have less luminescence than the whitish background. So we can move this in. I'd like to hear in the comments who is like so old they used this technique back in the days. If there's anybody in the comments who is so old they use this on a Roland machine, a video mixer. So yeah, in this case we take the dark, and if we take Luma key 1, we take the lightest parts and we cut it in like this. We make it transparent. It's a very messy way of mixing, but to be really honest, I really like this aesthetic, especially with this kind of old school vintage videos I'm using right now. Then there is also the last Luma function, that's Luma is alpha. This takes the luminescence and makes it translucent. And it starts with dark, it seems. I find this a less useful blend mode, but just probably because I like the harsh imagery of the Luma is key effects. I notice nobody in the comments is yet saying I'm old enough for Luma keying, so that's that means we have a young audience today. Yeah, there is someone. Gareth, nice, using on a V800. I actually VJ'd once with a V800 as well. We did this VJ project, and we were inspired by the whole bring your own beamer movement. This was a thing that was going on back in the back a few years ago, which would be sort of VJ parties where people would bring their own beamers and you could project on whatever you want, and there would be 10 VJs in one room party, and a lot of projection weirdness going on. And we expanded on that idea for a club party where we did bring your own video. So we had VHS players, we had DVD players, we had one of these Pioneer turntables that you could scratch with DVDs. It was pretty cool. And it was announced in advance that people could use their own video, could bring their own video. They could put it in a basket with us and we would VJ with it. And we had no clue what was happening. I remember one guy brought the wedding tape of his parents, which was really awkward. Of course, we got a lot of porn There was some Disney videos, Frozen stuff, like Disney, like Frozen and Bambi and stuff like that. And we had like this really, really mad party on it. So if you ever want to have like a really good, really cool VJ challenge, do a bring your own video challenge. People can bring DVDs, VHSs, whatever, and you VJ with it. It's a huge challenge and it's a lot of laughs. So pro tip. But talking about fun stuff, let's move on to the next category. So we had the very serious, or let's say a little bit more complex, abstract shape transition blend modes. Now we move on to the well, fun stuff. So I just put in some clips here, and I will just roll with you through the modes we didn't have. Because we're using some old school effects, I also dove into the Resolume Vault and pulled on some a little bit older videos from our label. This one is called F Acid Caveman. So the 50s I already explained. So let's move on to black and white. What it does is when you shift between two clips, it turns your clip black or white. Let's turn on this one 100%. So yeah, it's a black and white. It's a desaturation shift between the two clips. Cube. It is a cube. It doesn't lie. So it's a cube transform effect between the two clips. This stuff is probably more useful as a transition than as a blend effect, especially cut, because it's a hard cut between the two. It's basically lets you use the opacity slider as the how's this thing called? The crossfader. With hard cuts. Digi-glitch, this is an effect I use from time to time. It allows you to sort of glitch between the two modes. I think it's based on dissolve, which is almost the same, but it does it more cleanly. Blend between those two shapes. I skipped a few, I think. Digi-glitch displaces the content. It probably works nice on this one. It's a nice glitchy way of going through clips. Displacer. Yeah. So again, displaces the luminescence. Dissolve we just had. Exclusion, hard like jitterbug. Well, it gets again in glitchy territory here. The acid skull. You like the acid skull? Lighten, low res, lowers the resolution between clips. Luma is alpha. We had metamix. Will turn your clips into small shapes between mixing them. Probably also more of a transition effect. Multitask makes two screens. Again, it's probably more like a wipe. Multiply, noisy, uses a noise filter to switch between. Overlay we did. Parts slowly goes like this. Again, these are mostly transitional effects. Push down, and the rest of the pushes, well, you can probably imagine what they do. RGB is kind of cool. They shift the colors. The RGB colors are used. Rotate. Screen we already had. Shift RGB, this is the one I meant. This one can, in very subtlety, you can might be able to use it to mix two clips, but I think it's aimed at using it's made for a transition. Side by side. Well, what is it gonna be? Yes. Okay, so we shift between two. Soft light we already had. Static. subtract we already used. Tile. We make a little tiles of our clips. Time switcher. I'm not curious. I don't know. What does it do? Oh, it's like how you say, a build up. So if it goes really soft, really slow, and the further you go down, it goes like yeah. This is the build up for VJs. It's right here. I actually could see myself using this. I think it's pretty cool. Twitch, which is based on the effect twitch. It completely messes up, but I think this is, if used quickly, it's a good transition phase. UV map I will not show you, because UV map is a juice bar plugin. It's way too complex to explain in a few seconds. I will do a video quickly, shortly, or in a few weeks. I'll do a video where I'm using the UV map, and we'll show you how to get use plugins to get 3D objects into Resolume, because that's the future. So that's a cool thing that's coming up soon. Wipe ellipse. That's these old school wipe effects. They were also in the V800 machines. Zoom in, zoom out, and then fade to black and fade to color. I don't know which color it would take. It takes an average probably, yeah. Fade to white. So that's I would call fun stuff. Just quickly go through these effects, quickly switching, showing them off here. Now I'd like to talk about effects. Here I took the same clip 3 times in a row. Let's turn off the bottom layer, and here I use an effect, in this case the delay RGB effect, and the blend mode I use DigiGlitch. So when normally you would have probably an alpha or an add, is probably the default, either one of those two. Lower the opacity, and now I switch it to DigiGlitch. Actually, some more options are opening with some of these blend modes. DigiGlitch has that, Dissolve has that, because then you have the blend mode we just looked at, but you have some control of, in this case, the frequency and the zoom. So how far is this glitch effect zoomed out or zoomed in? How big is it? So you can get really big blocks, and maybe I want to turn it around a lot. So this is a way you can add sort of instead of having the regular RGB delay, I'm getting this digital artifact delay, which is, then you take a basic effect, you use a blend mode, and you create your own unique effects out of it. You can set the fade to color panel in the layers panel. Yeah. This is what Zoltan is for. Thank you. I didn't know that. Same idea here. I use the edge detection with an overlay blend mode to get sort of a painterly style. I think I'd call that painterly filter type, using the overlay and an edge detection. So if I turn this all the way up to 100, you can see the original, and I tone it down using the overlay. And yeah, so the overlay darkens the dark parts and lightens the light parts, and I get this nice effect. Here I made the invert RGB, and I set the blend mode also to RGB, giving me this nice color flicker whenever there's being shifted, the opacity is in the center. And I made an envelope to make it a little bit smoother. So instead of having just a full inversion, I made this sort of a negative. It wipes negative and it wipes positively. And last effect I used here. I used the screen blend mode with the hashed effect, which is a juice bar plugin, but again using a screen combined with opacity, lowered opacity to mixing the two. So, moving on, I wanted to take a look at transitions, just basic, show how transitions work. I have here a clip, and I have here another clip, and now when I click them, I switch between the two clips. This bar over here is the transition control. If you're not seeing this on your screen, you can go under View and go to Show Transition Layer Controls. Currently it's set to alpha, and if I move this a little bit up and I switch between the two clips, we're getting a fading effect. Using your scroll wheel on your mouse, you can dial it in. I'll give it 3 clicks. And so now we have a fading effect. But this is where the fun stuff like the zoom in and zoom out and the twitch comes into play. You can start transitioning between clips like this. Now I'm not going to go through all the effects we just showed, just showing that you can use effects like the low res to quickly switch more fluently between clips if this is something you're doing. If you have a VJing style in which you're transitioning more slowly between clips. If you're bashing really fast clips one after another, this is not a very smart move to not a tool for you. But having more slow transitions, and you can get it like really extreme times on it. Moving very slowly decaying and getting back into it. One cool little neat feature for those of you, there was somebody asking, should you change blend modes in between your in the middle of your set? I said no, you probably shouldn't. But if you're like that and you're a true warrior and you're like, okay, I go full on experimental mode, there is one additional mode here, which is random. It will pick a random transition for you and switch between. So let's do that a few times and see what happens. So here we get a normal one, some kind of wipe. That was a linescape kind of thing. That was the ellipse wipe, RGB wipe, DigiGlitch wipe, Twitch wipe. So it just jumps random to random effects. This is for those who are true astronauts, experimenters, who put their show on the line for experimentation. This is something you can use. Moving on to the last step, which is transition phases. We will use just an add in this case. And what this does, you can create on a layer. In this case, we'll use this layer. And I'll use an effect. Let's say distortion. And we want to distort it. Oh, I should add it on the right layer. Wrong layer. The layer we want to mix. Put the distortion on there. I want to close this down. I want to distort it a lot. So I distorted my clip quite a bit now. And I'll set the opacity to transition phase. This is this animation mode can only be used. Transition phase can only be used on effects that are on a layer. You cannot use this on a clip or on the composition. This is layer only. I made a longer tutorial on how it works, but I'll go through it quickly again. So I say transition phase, and now when I start a clip, you can see the opacity runs up. So the effect, as soon as the clip is triggered, it moves up and it stays there. If I increase the transition time, you'll see this line also starts moving slower. You can set a range here. Let's say, for example, I want only the maximum amount. So now it will wait and wait and wait and wait until it's at the end of the transition and then move over. And you can invert it as well. So the clip, once you press the button, it will go to a maximum. Let's lower this a little bit. So it moves from extreme distortion to 0 distortion, which is for a fade probably more useful. And then you can set all these effects, and what you could even do is set like, okay, I want to have more of this stuff. I'll use a transition phase for this as well, invert it as well. Nothing is happening. And now we have the combined power of distortion and of delay. And you can keep going on and going on and going on like this. I could say I want my TV effect, which is a plugin, and I'll set this to a timeline. Or no, I'll also set this to transition phase, and I'll set this to transition phase, and I'll want to both invert them. So when I go this, I have this nice old TV effect between the two clips. Transitioning. So that's transition phases. That's a really powerful tool. Go check out the tutorial I made on it. I explain it more slowly and more in depth. It's on our YouTube channel. And I think that wraps it up for this live stream. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. If there's anything you would like to see, I can show anything that's been missed. A direct dissolve, no alpha. Transition will be appreciated. I don't think there's a dissolve effect. So how would we go about doing that? So what you're basically asking for is that you want to have the dissolve, but without it being alpha, so it should be black. So let me know what you meant by a direct dissolve. Could we do something like, I'm getting a little experimental with your idea. So if this would be a solid color and it would be a dissolve, set to dissolve, would that work? Probably not. If we set this to alpha, this is a quick experimentation on my part. Set this to transition phase as well. Probably want to invert it then. So if we only do it at the beginning, and I'm taking a look at your questions. Blend effects using your own. We have the direct dissolve. Is it possible to use a blend effect using your own mapping or a mask image? Blend effects. I don't think you are able to use a mapping. You mean like something you do in the advanced output? Mapping? I don't think so. But there are some slice effects, some slice transforms. Maybe you could use these in combination with the transition phase to get something like that. but I have to look into that. That's a bit too complex to go into quickly now. But I'm writing this stuff down, so I might if it works and it gets a cool result, I'll make a video on it. Automatic cross dissolve. I also have to look into the dissolve, how to make that. I'll get back on that. If it's possible, I'll do a quick answer your question video soon. And the last question: if you're using groups, does this affect the way in which the blend modes interact, depending on whether they are not in the group? Yes, I think groups adhere to the basic rules of the blend modes, I think. But I think Zoltan in the comments can give you a better explanation on better answer on the question how groups interact with blend modes, because I'm not a big group user, so I couldn't tell. Yes, I think that's those were not very useful answers from my part, I think. I will look into some of the other stuff, and if it works, I'll get back to it in the next live stream. Well, I want to thank you all for your time, and I'll see you in a few weeks. We'll do another Get Juicy live stream. Hopefully in the next Get Juicy live stream I can get into 3D objects in Resolume. They made some plugins for that, so I'm really curious if that stuff is going to be ready and demonstrate some of that stuff. Otherwise, there's a lot of other cool stuff coming from our label. Footage-wise, there will be some. There might be even some new Resolume features. Who knows? That always can happen. And I know for 100% sure in the next Get Juicy live stream we'll do a giveaway. So definitely tune in for that. So I want to thank you all for joining in, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.